Hey, all right, welcome back to another wonderful day here at MSA. So glad you could be here. Glad you could join us. Now, check this out. We're going to hit up Senator Josh Hawley right off the bat. You know, he was blasting the Senate about this money for the foreign wars and the bills on the border and everything of that nature. He's one of my favorite of all the senators because this guy is pro-American. He's not, I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to jump on board with what other people want me to say that are within my party, in my clique. He is 100% behind Americans. And of course, you're going to have critics out there that say, oh no, Hawley's this and Hawley's that. No, every time I watch this guy, when he's in front of any committee, when he's in front of any hearing, when he's doing anything, he gets right down to the point. He asks some questions that get really hard to answer, and he's not afraid to tell you right to your face, you're not answering my question. That's not what I asked you. It's a simple yes or no. And he's wonderful. One of the things that Hawley is doing, okay, he's blasting the Senate on this foreign war stuff that's going on, as well as some of the stuff for the border. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just roll it right into this clip because there's a few that you've got to see some of the things that Hawley's talking about. This stuff is super important. And again, he does not hold back. He lets it be known what he's talking about, and what he's saying is 100% fact. And this stuff is super important. It goes along with some of the other stories that we've been doing. Now, pay close attention to what he's going to say. He's going to talk a little bit about the border, a little bit about China, and he's going to get into a few other things. So we're going to get right back to you in just a second. We're going to go over some of this stuff. But this is important, so be right back.
The threats that we face on all sides across the world are deadly serious. In China, and Imperial China is now twice as powerful relative to the United States as the Soviet Union was at its peak. And China explicitly seeks to dominate the world's largest economic area and to displace this country as a global power. They would have monumental, unprecedented implications. That would have monumental, unprecedented implications for America's interests. And we cannot allow that to happen. But right now, we are considering a so-called security supplemental that puts those pressing concerns last, not first. That does not do anything for our border at all. In fact, we were first served up a so-called border bill that would have made the problem worse, not better. A border bill that I think of as the Full Employment Act for illegal aliens. The border bill, so-called, that was before this chamber a week ago. That border bill, its central feature from my point of view, was to give illegal aliens already in the country expedited work permits. Expedited work permits now, such that millions of illegals, almost none of whom will ultimately qualify to remain here permanently in the country, including for asylum claims. Over 80% of asylum claims fail, we know statistically, and yet that bill would have given those illegal aliens here expedited work permits to go enter our labor force right now. We are looking at the flatlining of wages in this country for working people. Blue-collar workers, A, are having trouble finding a job, B, haven't seen a real rise in their wages in years. Over the last 30 years, blue-collar wages have declined, and yet the solution of this body would be to create even more cheap labor in this country. We know why the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Wall Street love that bill. It's a cheap labor bill. They love cheap labor. Their first preference would be overseas cheap labor, but if they can't get that, then why not subject Americans and those who are here legally to even more illegal cheap labor? It makes absolutely no sense at all, Mr. President, none at all, which is why I voted against it. And yet that's what we were offered as a solution to the border. As to a solution to China, this body has drug its feet and neglected its responsibilities toward China for years. One is tempted to say decades, and the current security supplemental does nothing meaningful in that regard. In fact, the focus is entirely, almost, certainly heavily, on Ukraine.
What'd you think of that? You see, what he had to talk about was pretty real from where I'm sitting. Because when you sit there and you look at it and you're like, China wants to become an economic global leader larger than the United States. What does that mean for the United States? Do you think the United States is going to have a lot to say about that once they get bigger and more powerful than us? Doubtful. And where are we getting all this extra money for all these foreign wars? We borrow it from China. Exactly. So if we're in debt to China and China's trying to do all these things and get their people into the country, if you've noticed that immigrants have been coming in by the tens of thousands, we did a story exactly on how Hayes, with the help of, Secretary of our Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, is helping get the funding through our government to Hayes into San Vicente, where the people are getting bused all the way up into our border that are coming in from China, and they're all young men, military age. Come on, get real. Think about what he is talking about. And when he says that we've done nothing, the bill supports nothing to start looking into China, we got a serious problem on our hands. Now, serious problem number 2, this labor thing. Cheap labor in the United States. As someone that's been in business, I can tell you this. Labor is one of the biggest things that can drag a business down really quick if you don't pay attention. It doesn't mean you run it like the Gestapo, but it also means that labor is pretty expensive because you need to pay people what they're worth. Now, when you have other companies that don't think about, this guy deserves a good wage so he can have a good life, when you have other companies that are out there that are like, well, we need to, maximize profits. And currently, our payroll is X per week, month, whatever it is. But we could hire a bunch of people that are here on work visas. We don't have to pay them the same. And if they don't like it, we get rid of them because there's more out there that we can find that will actually, let us pay them what we want to pay them. Think about it. When you have places like up in Seattle, that the minimum wage, I think it's $15 to $17 an hour. It could be $19 an hour by now to work in a fast food place. What does that do for the price of your burger? What does it do for the burger joint? Do you think they could sustain business when people are like, well, I can just drive down the road to a different place in another city and pay a lot less than what I have to pay here? See, that's what we're talking about cheap labor. Cheap labor isn't in your best interest because everybody wants to get paid more and do less, right? Get paid more. I've got this degree. I've got all this experience. You got people coming in from other countries that have degrees too, and they have experience, and they're willing to take it a lot less wage than you're willing to settle for. And they'll live with 2-3 families in one household to be able to sustain a decent lifestyle where, most of us want to live with our family and, have our big house as big as we can afford with our new cars sitting out front and all this other stuff, where you have other entities out there that are used to living with 2 to 3 families per household, share vehicles, share the responsibility of all the chores and the grocery shopping and everything, and taking care of children. And they get by just fine because they have multiple incomes coming into one house instead of just 1 or 2. So we got to start paying attention to that kind of stuff. The other part that I found really interesting was that, being a senator, he knows what he's talking about when he says 80% of all the asylum claims that come into our country don't make it through. They get sent back. So right now, picture, we have over 8 million people. The last count was around 10. We have 10 million people here, and 80% of those aren't going to qualify. So that means 8 million people are going to go home. Really? Just like that. Doubtful. This is going to get really, really, really interesting. Now, I have another clip that I want to play because Josh Hawley brought something up really important about this foreign war and how it directly affects some people here in the United States. And I think this message really needs to get heard. I know this message really needs to get heard because, again, Senator Hawley is one of the good ones. He will bring things up that need to be heard where other ones are, don't rock the boat, don't talk about that kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, you just talked bad about another senator. He's not afraid of that. Why? Because he works for the people. He loves our country. So let's go ahead and roll this other clip. It's a little bit longer, but you got to pay attention to what he says because what he says is extremely important. And I mean, it's really important. So be right back. Hang in there. See you in just a minute.
It's because of what the federal government has done and done for decades. Why do I mention it? Well, because the program that this government set up some years ago to compensate those Americans who have been exposed by their government to nuclear radiation is about to expire. And just a few months ago, I secured the approval of this body to renew it. We passed here on the floor of this body with a strong bipartisan vote a renewal measure to make good on our promise to those Americans who've been exposed to nuclear radiation by their government, who've grown ill because of nuclear radiation by their government, who have died because of nuclear radiation by their government, to make good on our promise to help them. We passed it. We also included in that legislation relief for the people of St. Louis and St. Charles and others in Missouri, relief for the people of New Mexico and Arizona and Utah and others who were downwind of these tests that we saw so vividly portrayed in the Oppenheimer movie and elsewhere. And then what happened, Mr. President? Well, I'll tell you what happened. The National Defense Authorization Act, the defense bill, went to conference. And there, despite the strong bipartisan vote on this floor, there it was removed in a backroom deal. Senator McConnell and others led the charge to remove this provision. And what was the rationale? What were we told? Why was it that nuclear radiation victims from Missouri to Kentucky to Tennessee to Alaska cannot be compensated, according to so-called leadership? What was the rationale, Mr. President? No, I remember it vividly. I've heard it. It rings in my ears every day. The rationale is we don't have the money. The rationale is it's too expensive to do right by the American people who have suffered and died because of their government's nuclear radiation program. The rationale was we can't possibly afford it. That was the rationale. And now, lo and behold, I turn, Mr. President, to this bill before us, and I find we seem to have unlimited sums of money when it comes to foreign wars. Good Lord, when it comes to funding the machinery of war, we have money, we have money, we have money that we couldn't possibly dream of. We can run the presses indefinitely if it's going to go overseas. If we're going to be paying foreign governments, why, we've got enough money, apparently, to send $8 billion direct to the treasury of Ukraine. My goodness, we have enough money to make hundreds of millions of dollars of our taxpayer funds available to the private sector in Ukraine. We are now literally funding their businesses, their banks, Lord knows what. We've got money without end. We've got enough money to pay for bureaucrats' salaries. We've got enough money to pay for Ukrainian government officials' pensions. We've got enough money for so-called humanitarian aid that gets funneled away from, siphoned off into any manner of corrupt uses. We won't know because we don't have a special inspector general to oversee this money, but that's a different story. Oh no, we've got plenty of money. And I have listened carefully to colleague after colleague of mine come to this floor and stand where I am now and say, it's so important that we spend this money on these overseas wars. We must spend the money. If we don't spend this money now, why, it may cost us more money in the future. No, it's imperative. It's imperative that we spend this money. Meanwhile, these same people turn to the citizens of Missouri and say, you're not worth a dime. They say, you can't have a penny. They turn to the residents of Kentucky and Tennessee and Alaska and New Mexico and Arizona and Utah and Texas, and they say, we don't care that you were poisoned. We don't have a dime for you. We have unlimited money for Ukraine.
Well, there we have it. Okay, I told you, Josh Hawley doesn't hold back. He really doesn't. I love it. It's absolutely wonderful. He's fighting for the people that have been exposed to nuclear radiation over the years. It's been for decades. There's a lot of that clip I didn't play, but he literally for decades, people have been exposed to it. I believe he said that in St. Louis County, they have the highest rate of breast cancer now and children cancers in the nation. And it all has to tie in with a lot of the nuclear radiation that was exposed to in their areas, in their creeks, and how it was put into their landfills and things of that nature, and how he got behind a bill to help compensate these families because of what our government has done. Now, mind you, here's a government official going to the government to get a bill to pass to help take care of the American people. What does that tell you about Josh Hawley? Should tell you a lot about Josh Hawley because he got it passed. And then what happens? In a backdoor deal, Mitch McConnell, the one they keep saying is too old to be in office, Mitch McConnell squashes it for defense. So we can start looking at giving money to Ukraine. What are we doing? Really? Did you hear what he had to say about $8 billion going into their... I mean, what is going on here? We're paying for their commerce? And not only that humanitarian aid, I bet you didn't know that there was a wife of a senior, I believe it was a senior defense official for Ukraine that got caught at the border of Poland with over $10 million in cash, U.S. cash. I bet you didn't know that Michael Lee put out a report that the CIA had to call Mr. Zelensky himself, the guy that runs Ukraine, about his corruption. Okay, those are not being covered, are they? See, lamestream media, they don't cover that. They don't tell you that. Why? Because you hear people like, I believe it was Tom Tillis, that one of the senators got up and starts saying how we have to be part of this. We've got to take care of Ukraine and all that stuff. When are you going to take care of America, Tom? When are you going to do any of that? How many of your buddies run those defense contractors? Or even better, how about we just start looking into all the people that are so gung-ho to keep getting into these wars and want to fund all this money into the defense? Because this $60 billion, a lot of it's going to the defense contractors to replenish our ammunitions and weaponry that we've given to Ukraine. So how many of our senators and congressmen own stocks in these companies? How many? We've had a lot of congressmen. I don't want to start controversy, but we've had a lot of congressmen and a lot of senators come up in the millions on stock trading. And they say it's, because we lobby. I'm sorry, but if you're a congressman or a senator, you shouldn't be able to lobby and do stocks. I mean, really? Because I'd love that. I mean, I'd be fatter than fat when it came to cash. If that's the case, I mean, look at all the stuff they talk about with Nancy Pelosi and how they have people that own companies that teach you how to follow the senators and see what they're trading. And if you trade with that, you make a lot of money. And there's actually people that actually make a lot of money doing this. It's not a scam. It's a real thing because you can follow what they do. Now let's get back into this. So if I'm to understand exactly what Josh Hawley was talking about, we have $60 billion that they're looking to send over to Ukraine to replenish our ammunitions and things of that nature that we used to help Ukraine when all this started. At some point in time, people think that they can actually defeat Russia, which I don't even understand how that works because, I mean, Putin could annihilate Ukraine like that. We all know this, okay? Because we know we don't want to get in a war with Russia because of their power that they have and their weaponry, let alone Ukraine. And if you watch the interview with Tucker Carlson talked with Putin. Putin gave this long 30-minute spiel about the history of Ukraine and Russia and all that and how it came to be and all this. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but in the beginning of all of this, Putin sent a letter to NATO and said, if you stay out of my country, I will not invade Ukraine. And they didn't. They disregarded it. They didn't believe him. And look what he did. Okay? At one point in time, Putin's tried to join NATO twice and somehow got denied. Okay? That's whatever. It's not what this is about. But I'm just giving you a little bit. So why are we, after we've already paid 113, I believe it is, $billion to Ukraine to help them, now we're going to send over another 60 billion. At some point in time, can we please stop doing this and take a look at what's going on in our own country? Look around. How many of you drive by homeless people on the street every day? And they're drug addicts. They're not the standard homeless people that you used to see 20 years ago. Okay, these are drug addicts. They're spun out. And they can't function. So they get their little shopping cart and they fill it up with all their clothes and car seats and all kinds of crap that they find along the road, and they push it down the way, right? We're not helping them. Yet we've got all the migrants that have come in, and that's part of what Josh Hawley was talking about. We've got all these migrants that have come in, and we're definitely funding a lot of that money into them. $15 billion a year is going into the migration problem right now. Do you know that? $15 billion a year. And that's not the migration problem. That's the migrants that are here that we're paying to be here. Here's a little bite on that, okay? I don't know if you know this, but this CBP One app, I believe it's called, that you put on your phone when you want to seek asylum into the United States, over 64 million people have applied. Okay, we have over 10 million here. Over 64 million people have applied. Fathom that. Okay, so if this administration has their way, we're overrun. Not only are we overrun, we are not doing anything about China. We're just letting them go along with whatever they need to go along with. And we're just falling right into play, and we're allowing tens of thousands of young military-aged Chinese men to come right on in, even though we've busted, their little police stations that they've set up secretly and their little spy centers that they've set up in the United States, and how they've been trying to hack into all of our systems on a daily basis. There's a sheriff that's out there that he's one out of, I think, 3,200 different sheriffs around our nation, that they get hit 4 to 5 times a day by cyber hacks from Chinese. And then I'll do a segment on it. If somebody wants to see it, I'll go ahead and run it. And that way people maybe will start believing it. But do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, because we need to get the messages of these things out. We've got people here in the United States that legitimately filed claims because they were injured from nuclear radiation and nuclear waste. And with the snap of a finger, McConnell and his cronies went ahead and cut off that stream of helping people. Do you know how sick those people get? They can't function. And we're trying to help them because of something that we did to try to make ours, arsenal better. And now we just turn our backs on them? Cut them off just like that, but we've got gobs of money to send out to foreign war? What the heck is going on here? There is no need for foreign war. We don't need this. This is ridiculous. What are we fighting? They keep talking about sending money to Israel. Israel has over $205 billion in the bank. It's proven. Why are we keep shelling them out money? So they can keep throwing it at Hamas? Why don't we go directly to Iran and make Iran stop Hamas right now? There's a good idea. Either way, do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe. We're going to keep coming back to you with a lot more stories just like this. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to cover, and we're not going to keep pounding this one into the pavement. But, man, somebody's got to start paying attention. I mean, this is getting off the chain, completely off the chain. I've never seen an administration ignore America the way that we're ignoring it now. And I won't say we're like I'm involved in it, because I'm not. And I know a lot of you are not either. So, love each and every one of you. You have a great day or night wherever you're at, whatever time it may be. And we'll see you again. Have a good night, day, whatever it is. Bye.